Hello, my name is Caroline, and I am going to be interviewing this kind subject for our Justice Studies interview project.
Who shall not be named.
Would you like to use a pseudonym or your given name for this interview?
Given name is okay.
Can you tell us your name?
Ryan Bradley Herrick is my full legal name.
Okay, Ryan Bradley Herrick. Can you tell us a little bit about where you come from?
Physically, I was born in Concord, Massachusetts, and spent my first 18 years of life in Marlborough, Massachusetts, where my mother's side of the family has lived for multiple generations. So a New England family going back towards all the way to the colonization of the United States. So a long history of New Englanders with Boston accents and very particular ways of living.
So is this important to your self-history, your family's lineage in New England?
It is important to my self-history because, one, I think being the first one at least on my mother's side of the family, to leave New England area to be living and working in the Southeast, that's a pretty major factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what made you move and where you're living now?
Multiple things made me move. I think a little hesitation at first, but really wanted to go somewhere new and be closer to my lovely bride now. She's sitting behind the camera. This was 10 years ago? Exactly 10 years ago. Moved down to Clemson, South Carolina, and found a really nice place by the lake in Clemson, and spent 4 years there studying and working and becoming an engineer. So I'm becoming an adult, and I'm finding a lot about myself over those 5 years.
You mentioned that you're an engineer, or you became an engineer. How did you decide to become an engineer?
How does one decide to be anything? So kind of just aptitudes of math and science, and really enjoying building things, and as some may say, taking them apart more than building. But that's part of going through the career part of engineering is learning how to put things together from scratch, or to rebuild them and make them better. So started, of course, when I was probably 3-4 years old, with cars, playing with cars and toys and Legos and all of the mechanical toys, building blocks and Lincoln Logs and everything that you could think of, really. Tinker Toys and anything you build from more than 2 or 3 pieces to something.
Are there any specific figures in your childhood who led you on this path to play with these toys, or who engaged with you in your tinkering?
Well, I think there's 2 really. My dad's an electrical engineer, and he did a lot of woodworking and construction on his own. Learned how to do things just from reading books, or just from trying and failing. Of course, you do some trial and error to learn how to do things like building your house, or building out the walls in your basement, something like that, something simple. But the other thing I think was my grampy, who is my mother's father, was an airplane mechanic as well as a car enthusiast. So I think that was kind of where I got that automotive and desire to pursue an automotive track and get into mechanical engineering specifically, versus like electrical or chemical or some other engineering form. So I think those are the 2 people, young in the early years, kind of forming my desire to explore engineering.
So You mentioned your grandfather and your father both as being engineers and having influence on your life. Um, Fathers have an awesome responsibility of laying a foundation for their child's future when they're present at home. But what does that mean exactly? Can you describe how your dad or your grandfather helped meet your family needs?
I think there's a lot, and then maybe both figures had that same kind of, this same kind of thought process was to live fairly simply, and to save, as much money as they could to be able to um, give their children the ability to go to college or to pursue whatever they wanted to pursue. Of course, college was definitely pushed by my parents and probably by their parents as well, because they didn't necessarily pursue higher education to the same degree. So there's that. Yeah. So being financially conservative. What else? Just putting education first. I grew up doing sports, but was never as invested in that as much as education for sure.
Would you say that education and sports are in conflict in your life, or education and I would say leisure? Is that something that you still find in conflict?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think just as much as sports or exercise or whatever leisure activity, as much as that can drive my motivation or my desire to do more, I think you can get the same kind of reward from learning more, from working on new types of projects or new types of